Salutations, everyone. Asians still can't play football. Now, as a South Asian football fan myself, it's something I've heard throughout my entire life. Stick to cricket because that's our sport. Back in 1996, Jas Bains published a report titled Asians Can't Play Football, highlighting the problems British Asian footballers face trying to break into the professional game. Now, 25 years on, and it appears we're still underrepresented in the sport. Or are we? Did you know about the Asian footballer who won the FA Cup? Or the one who won the FA Youth Cup? Or the one who got to the Championship playoff final? How about the one who won the Golden Boot, league title, and got to the Champions League final? For those within the game, it feels like a pivotal moment in history. We are seeing more players, managers, coaches, commentators, and we're slowly beginning to become part of the fabric. My name is Swami Barakas, and I'm co-host of The Native Immigrants, a podcast that tackles the issues, taboos, and topics within the British Asian community. Joining me today to discuss this topic is Apu Vyas. Now, a couple of years back, the head scout of a London football club told his son that Asians aren't big enough or strong enough to make it in the game. That's led to him going on a journey of raising awareness and networking with people that's culminated in his podcast, Our Game Too. Also with us is Z, a former sports editor of the Eastern Eye newspaper and founder of Desi Ballers, a platform providing visibility of players of South Asian heritage in professional football in the UK, Europe, and North America. And tonight, we're going to delve into the truth and put the stereotypes, myths, and ironic references to bed, once and for all, and start looking forward together. So, as part of South Asian Heritage Month, the FA put together a 6-part series called Football and Me, showcasing a few of the South Asians involved in the game. In these videos, we also hear from England manager Gareth Southgate, who has expressed his thoughts and feelings on the exclusion of South Asians from the debate. Let's check out this clip right now.
Sometimes the Asian voice has been lost in the anti-discrimination argument, and when you look at the percentages of the population that we're talking about, it's high numbers. Frankly, it's a big talent pool that we're missing. You know, within football, we don't have high numbers of English qualified players playing anyway. Clubs in their academies are always searching for talent. It's like in any business, if you're only selecting from a smaller section of the population, then what are you missing?
Strong words from the England football manager. Boys, say hello.
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 Look at this. So Z's currently come very, very formal for this show, which we love to see. I'm here repping Bayern Munich, the Bundesliga champions, right side up. I can see a West Ham shirt in the background there, Apu.
You can indeed, yep.
Very good, very, very lovely. Well, let's kick off with you then, Apu. Tonight, we're going to start with the question: why is football missing out on Asian talent?
That's a big question, and there are lots and lots of there's lots of issues, there's lots of obstacles, but the important thing I think is that there is slowly lots being done to change it. Unfortunately, there are still myths, there are still stereotypes, and they're still affecting players today. I've had another issue, we won't go into the details, but I've had another issue with my son this week where he's been trialing for 2 teams. The manager of one team has said he's the best goalkeeper that he's got, and the other one has already said to him, and these are the same goalkeepers that are trialing for these 2 teams, and the other manager said, yeah, he's not for me.
Yeah, tough. What are your thoughts on it, Z?
I think, as Apu mentioned, there's a lot of issues, and they've been talked about for the last 20, 25 years. Ever since the report came out in 1996, we've been hearing about there's been the visible exclusion, some would say, because we're not seeing any kind of visibility or in any of the media or any of the communication that we we digest, right? So if you can't see a player playing on the pitch or in the newspapers or in the media, it looks like they don't exist. But the fact is, we do have players who are in the system, who have gone through it. And although the numbers might be small, and we can quote some of the statistics. So one statistic that always gets quoted is, out of the professional players who play in professional football in England, let's say the number's around 3,500, 0.25% is made up of players with South Asian heritage. Now, when you look at that as a statistic, it makes you think we're not even a percentage, first of all. But there's another stat we can look at about football being an elite industry. And there's another stat, if you don't mind me saying, that out of 1.5 million children who play in organized football teams, only 128 from that 1.5 million will make it as a pro. Now, that as a percentage is 0.012%. And that either goes to show that football is an absolute elite industry where it's very difficult to get in. And the other stat shows that we're not even represented. Now, what we have to look at is, why is that, and where can we start to understand why our numbers are so low? And normally what happens is we look at the end product, which is what's happening on the pitch. We don't see the players, but there's a whole journey that you have to go through. And Apir and I have spoken about this on the podcast together on Our Game 2, about the different touch points a player will go through from the age of 6, 7, 8, all the way up to the age of 18. And that's not even him getting to a professional standard yet. And then there's the whole professional from 18 onwards. So we have to understand every part of the journey to really see where are these issues. Now, I will say anyone who says the issue is to do with discrimination, racism, whether it's cultural, education, all those are factors. We can't deny them. They're all factors.
Well,
now, what we have to look at is whether, yes.
No. So let's look at those factors specifically. So we've spoken about culture. You guys have spoken about it on your podcast as well. We've spoken about size. We've spoken about diet. We've spoken about families and parents. If we go through each of those 4 factors and kind of determine whether those actually do play a significant role in the development of the potential Asian footballer, and whether it is actually inhibiting them from actually progressing within the game. What are your thoughts?
So if I start off just by saying, look, people are under a misconception that there's such a thing as race. I know this might be controversial, but all scientists will tell you race does not exist. Race is a social construct. And when you delve into it, and this is something that UNESCO and people like that have been saying for 50, 60 years, it's such a shame that they don't teach this in a curriculum. Because if they did, you'd have 50, 60 years worth of people knowing that scientifically. So there's that side to it. And there's 2 ways you could look at it. One is, all right, let's talk about size. Some of the best and the most successful Asian footballers that have been out there have been defenders. People like Anwar Uddin, who was the first Asian to captain a team at Wembley. He captained West Ham's FA Youth Cup winning team that included Joe Cole, Michael Carrick, etc. He was a defender. He was a no-nonsense, big lump defender. You've got Danny Butt at Stoke, who's 6 foot plus, and he's a centre back and he's leading the line. So on that side, it doesn't matter about size because we're demonstrating that, yes, we are big enough. But then also you've got to look at the way football's changing. Size, does that come into it? The best player in the world? At least half the people in the world would say Messi. He's not big.
So what about in terms of the cultural side of things? In terms of, obviously, we've known throughout our lives, being Asians ourselves, the key kind of careers paths that our parents encourage us, whether it's doctors, lawyers, accountants, and these kind of things. I know we've heard these stereotypes and stuff before, and obviously things are changing with the younger generation going forward. But do you guys still feel that that's even considered a factor nowadays in today's generation?
Let me just say very quickly before I pass on to Z, there's a real danger about homogenizing, especially, we're calling them Asians, homogenizing Asians. Everyone's different. There's so many different types of Asians from so many different parts of of the world. There's so many religions, there's cultures, languages, all of that's different generations as well. And everyone's got different kind of focuses and pressures, etc. And yes, you will get some people that will focus on education, but that's not limited to Asians. That's everybody. Education is a magic bullet for so many different kinds of people. And then you've also got the fact that people are focusing on both, and even places like the EFL, the football league, they concentrate on education. So it's not as if education has to be forgotten. Sorry, Z, go on.
What I was going to add was there was an interesting article which summed up cultural aspects of different generations. So there's a player called Laith Gulzar who plays for Brighton's under-16s. And he had an interview with the Independent newspaper where his dad spoke about when his parents came over. And you can, I don't want to homogenize and group everyone, but migration in the 60s and 70s, when our parents and grandparents came over, their sole purpose was to try to make a life, trying to survive, trying to get a foothold in this country, right? That was the first part, to create a base for the next generation. Then the next generation is going to go by whatever the parents understood to be the best case of social mobility. And the best case of social mobility is going to be being educated and going for those top jobs, right? Even in law, in accounting, in whether it's in being a doctor and everything, because they are considered to be high level in society jobs. So why wouldn't you encourage your children to go into that pathway? When you look at sport, and we simplify by saying that we're not interested in sport, and I think that's something we just have to kill off now. We love sport, we've been embedded in it from the 60s and 70s. If you think about the World Cup in 1983, where it took place was in England, there were a lot of sports fans going to Lord's cricket ground to see India beat West Indies. So we've always loved sport, and I know I mentioned cricket, but this is across all sports. There's plenty of stories of a lot of Asians tend to support Liverpool in the 80s because they were successful, and you hear about some of the anecdotes of those individuals who were in the 80s who were in their 20s back then, who actually went to Anfield and went around watching Liverpool play at the stadium. There weren't many in number, but those anecdotes exist. And we need to put that more into the spotlight, that we have had a foothold and we have had an existence in this game that extends beyond Premier League years, before 1992, we had this foothold. And if we say that we had a base, that's our base, the only thing we should do is be looking up. So if 80s, we had loads of fans, 90s, we start having people playing and interacting, playing in teams. And Apu, you've mentioned on the podcast as well about playing football for 11-a-side teams and playing in tournaments. You can't say that you weren't interested in football. So I think as a community, we should be proud enough to say, you know what, education paramount, because there's an obvious end goal to it, but we have a love for sport as well. And what we're doing now is getting educated in how sport as an industry works. Because when we watch sport, we watch it as the entertainment product, the end product. We don't see everything that goes behind the scenes for that 90-minute game to take place. Same thing with the entertainment industry. You watch the film, but you don't know the hours of filming and shooting and casting that goes on. So we start looking football specifically as an industry. That's the education we need. How do those different things work in football? And more so now. And Swami, you've had Manisha Taylor on your podcast recently as well. Yes. Currently in QPR as assistant head of coaching. That is part of our story now, that we have these individuals and we need to hear from them about what their understanding in education and learning is from within the system that we're trying to get educated in. So it's no longer the entertainment from the 90 minutes. We want to be educated in every aspect. How do you get those trials? How do you get coaching? What sort of coaching you should have? If we mentioned diet as well. Well, what is the diet of the footballer? What should we be feeding our kids? These are the things. So rather than saying these are the stereotypes, let's look at the solutions we need to put in place, and who can we learn from is from football itself. So we can see the way Cristiano lives his life, right? We even saw it at the Euros when he removed the Coke bottles and talked about water. For him, that's the most important thing, to live a healthy lifestyle. And why wouldn't you want to follow the example of one of the best players in the world, right? And he doesn't necessarily have to be Asian. But then what the other fact is, if we want to relate back to home, because there's a whole phrase of you can't be what you can't see, then let's ask the South Asian players at the top of their game, regardless whether it's Premier League, League One, League Two, how are you living your life? What pathway did you take? What were your knockbacks? How did you deal from it? That's the education part that we need. So yes, there's something is true that stereotypes will always be there, but we need to start talking with more authority on certain subjects and referring and having reference points to those subject, the people who are able to talk on that matter better. Like Apu mentioned, Anwar Danny Bart, squash the whole rumor of players not being physically strong enough. The other rumor or the stereotype, Asians don't like the tackle, and why are they all defenders, right? It doesn't make sense. Why would a team employ a brown fella as a defender if he didn't like the tackle, right? Footballing terms, tackle. So basically, that's basically how we can start attacking some of these stereotypes and these preconceptions by giving visible anecdotes and examples. And the more we do these kind of conversation and talks and level up on our conversation as well, like within the first 15 minutes, we haven't just focused on all the negativity. We mentioned examples of good practice, and that's how we should always be in our speech in order for us to be moving forward. Now, hopefully, anyone who's listening can take some heed in that there's good things happening, and hopefully we can shine a light on some of the good stuff that's happening in spite of the barriers that still exist and in spite of the kind of blockers that are in place as well. We want to show that there is a way to push through there, but a lot needs to be done, and it's going to take the will of us as well as the football industry as well.
Very, very well put there. See, big up. You've actually covered the whole show within the gamut of the last 10 minutes. So, yeah, well done on yourself. But before we tackle actually what is happening within the sport, the only thing I'd like to add to that is also being inspired by role models within the game. And obviously, we've spoken just now about a few of the footballers that have competed in top level football. I think going forward, the crop of players that come through from youth development through to the first team football, whether it's at the top level, whether it's through league football, whether it is the conference, I think it will allow also the next generation to be inspired and want to take up the sport themselves. When I was growing up in the 90s, I only really saw like Michael Chopra probably was the only player of South Asian origin competing at the top level at that point. And obviously he's had a bit of a storied career in terms of his off the field activities, and so didn't really inspire a lot of people to take up the sport potentially. Whereas since then, there's Rehman, playing for Fulham. Nowadays you've got guys like Hamza Chowdhury. I've actually got the Charity Shield running in the background as we're talking. So I've got a little bit of an eye focused and seeing how he gets on basically against Man City. But again, this is the top level game where we have representation of a South Asian footballer playing in the top level football. And I guess that's what inspires that next generation as well at the same time, when they see people with the same skin color as themselves playing the sport, and it can only inspire them. And the more we see of our footballers coming through, and challenging those first team positions in their respective clubs, I think we'll also get the next generation of young Asian footballer to want to take up a career in it themselves. That's my 2 pence anyway. So let's look at the positives. We've looked at the stereotypes. We've looked at all the negativity, the connotations that have come with Asians in football for the last 25 years. But as I mentioned in the opening monologue, it is a pivotal time in history in that now we are seeing more and more Asian footballers, across all the leagues here in England. And I think there is a lot obviously happening behind the scenes as well, within the game and within our community itself. So Apu, why don't you discuss some of those measures that's happening currently to develop the game?
I think one of the things which I love that's happened in the last year is, if there have been Asian players, they've been the exception. At the moment, we are talking about the professional game, high-level semi-pro game as well. But there are so many players coming through. There are so many coaches, etc., that there's a lot more news happening. And one of the things which was created last year, which I think is fantastic, was Sky Sports now have a page dedicated on their website to Asians in football. And that page has been created mainly by a chap called Dev Trehan, who is one of the producers there. I know he doesn't like taking a lot of credit, but he's got content as well. And when I say he's got content, he's putting up 3-4 articles a week, which, if you think about that over the course of a year, that's obviously over 150, coming up towards 200 articles a week around Asians in football. So that's how much is happening. And that's something, and it's just such a fantastic reference. None of the other media companies have done anything similar yet. They'll dip their toes in every now and then. So big up to Sky Sports, fantastic for doing that. You mentioned Zesh. Z, do you want to tell him about what Zesh's brother is up to?
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, Zesh Rahman set up a foundation called the Zesh Rahman Foundation. And part of that was to use his experiences within the game to help the next generation learn more about football and encourage them into football, not just as players, but also coaches and other roles as well. And they've been doing great work with like Bradford City. They worked with Liverpool in the past and Chelsea to create opportunities. And the person who's been instrumental in running a lot of the operations, because Zesh is currently based in Hong Kong, has been his brother Riz Rahman. And Riz himself was a promising player. So when Zesh was coming through at Fulham, Riz was at Brentford and was a pro player as well, but an injury cut short his career. And then fast forward to 2010, he was leading the operations. And he's also been working with the Professional Footballers Association as well, the PFA, which is the Players Union. And earlier this year, they announced the Asian Inclusion Mentoring Scheme, which essentially is gathering and identifying all players of South Asian origin within the system, from your professional players to your scholars to your academy players, and creating a kind of a conveyor belt of communication between all levels of the game, specifically for the South Asian players, to act as mentors. So you have your senior pros who will be mentors to your young pros, and young pros will mentor your scholars, and your scholars act as mentors for the academy players. What that does is help the players who are in the system. Now, it's quite unique in the sense that it's only confined to the players who are in the system. You have to be in the academy, you have to be in the professional system. And to be honest, I think a lot of people think it should be opened up wider, but if you're trying to work out the best practice of this model, maybe there's something that can be implemented for the grassroots and community as well. But here specifically, it is trying to ensure that these young players who are coming through understand the expectation and demand they have as they go through the football education. So from academy to scholar, what does it take? What should they be doing? And really, any player could be a mentor to that. It doesn't have to be an Asian player, but we've always said that if it was someone who looked like us, giving us information, who step, and we're walking in their footsteps, it makes it that much better, that much easier. It empowers you a little bit more. And the big thing for me was, over the last year, we've had COVID and we've had lockdown, and a lot of these sessions were taking place on Zoom. But there were two events that took place, I think it was in May, where you saw visibility of young Asian players coming together with their team kits on. Now, for me, it's a big sign, because naturally when you see a young player, you see them in the bibs and playing in parks and everything. Now we're seeing there is a selection. It wasn't all of them, it was a selection of them, a crop of talent that's wearing the club badges at all levels of the game. It just makes you feel more attached to those players. And if you want to use, if you want to show to your youngsters, then look at these players. They're in the academy. They're still going through their journey, but look at where they are. And then when you include the senior players in as well, which they did a couple of weeks after that, it just showed this whole conveyor of these big giants who are like the pros of the game, standing shoulder to shoulder with your scholar and academy players. For me, personally, that's a big look, because all of a sudden we've now got our picture that shows, look, brown faces, and they're from all communities. You got Bangladesh represented, you got India represented, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and that when we're talking about South Asians, we're not one community. We're made up of a number of communities. So we have to understand that there's other nuances as well when it comes to race, religion, and standard within our societies and everything. But when you see that connection, all them together, you're thinking, imagine if we replicate that at community level. And we're talking about the 99% level, how good of a picture would that be? And how much of a bigger of a picture would that be if we all stood side to side like that? It's a for me, it's a metaphor.
Do you think that's actually had, it's an interesting point there. Do you think that's actually had a detrimental effect on our collective community moving forward together in terms of Asians in football, because there is that level of segregation, I feel now, between our individual communities, whereas you know, if you look at, say, the Black community, whether it's if from African backgrounds, from Caribbean backgrounds, people get together and support each other to, you know, as one collective community, whether that is in football, whether it's in music, it's something that we've spoken about previously before. Has that, do you feel the levels of potential division and segregation within our own individual communities had a detrimental effect in terms of wanting to support and push and develop the next level of Asian footballer here in the UK?
I think one of my initial response to that was what you're doing is throwing it back to the Asian community, and as almost as if you're suggesting the Asian community itself isn't doing enough to either support each other or to focus on becoming footballers, etc. And there's an element of that, of course there is, but from people that have been researching this, you've got several academics who've been writing books on this subject, they've been lecturing on this subject. They will tell you that the majority of the obstacles are from the football industry, and they're not all there deliberately, but let me give you one example. What people don't know is that football, or maybe they don't realize, is there's so much nepotism in there. And I don't just mean familial nepotism. It's if you've got a scout at a football club, he will have connections with other football clubs, like lower down, that he knows he can go to, and he'll spot good players. Now, the chances are those clubs that he knows he can go to, they're not going to be Asian clubs. Yep. So he's going to be going to the same clubs because he knows they've got good setups, they've got good coaches. If he picks up a kid from one of those clubs, he's not going to embarrass himself, and no one's going to say to him, that was a poor kid you've chosen. And he may not want to take a chance going to an Asian club because he doesn't know them. He's got no connection to them. So that's an example of something that's external to football. And that's one of the things that has been worked on. We've talked about some of the initiatives, etc. There's lots and lots of Asian football clubs. There's a few that even play at step 4. I think there's a couple promoted to this year, right? Sporting Kausa and see you remind me of the other one in a second. I think at this point it's worth mentioning the FA as well. Two things about the FA. First of all, a lot of people think the FA control the game in this country. Unfortunately, they don't. You've got the Premier League, got the EFL, and then you've got all the football clubs. They're all separate entities. So the FA can only do what they do. What they have done, I'd say sporadically in the past, is set up initiatives to try and either build relationships or try and highlight certain people within the game, etc. And the trouble in the past has been whoever's running that, if they leave, what happens to that system? Does it fall down? Does it continue? Which it usually doesn't. But they've now got, at the moment, they've got Dal Darroch, who's heading up that side of it, who's very visibly Asian. He's got a turban, everything like that. He was one who interviewed Hamza a couple of days ago. And they've got a lot more people in the background. They've got coaches like Butch Fazal, for instance. They've got other people that are working on the women's side of the game. And what they're trying to do is they're highlighting role models, they're highlighting mentors or possible mentors, and they're also helping to facilitate building those relationships to try and bridge that gap between the professional game and the Asian clubs, and therefore the Asians as well. Is there anything to add on that?
I want to go back to Swami's point.
Before you add that point, Z, we're just going to touch base with Cash the Flash, who's just posed us a comment on the show. And he's saying, I was the first UK Asian world champion in a contact sport. I had no role models once we get one, others. I think he's trying to say basically that there wasn't anyone to look up to, and him basically coming into the sport. And I think the point of that is basically that we need more people like coming through the system across all sports, whether it's football, etc. Because you can only get inspired by the people you see and the guys that are there before you to set that stall off, which is what I was mentioning before. So fingers crossed, like I said, we're getting more people coming through, and that can enable that to happen. Any thoughts on that yourselves?
Yeah, I go back to your point about whether there's been that segregation with our communities, but also talk about role models as well. So if I go back to that PFA Ames project and that picture, now with South Asian community, what happened is when you've got an article that comes out about a South Asian footballer, what immediately happens is we look at his background. So we see if we
Yeah.
can relate to him. So because there's so many communities put together as part of South Asia, if that player is, just say he's Pakistani Muslim, would he resonate with a Hindu from India? I'm just putting it out there, would he have a connection? If we be honest, sometimes we feel more pride when it's someone who is exactly like us, not just brown,
Yeah, no,
but
sure,
has those individual characteristics as well, where they come from the same region back home, where the same religion. If you listen to in the FA videos, talk about Zidane Iqbal saying Mesut Ozil is one of his like heroes or who he tries to emulate, and it's good to see another Muslim player like myself. That is very important to understand as well. So just by putting one or two players, you probably, and I hate to use this word, you probably alienate the rest of the Asian communities because you go, well, how can I relate to him? Because he's not Pakistani or he's not Muslim or he's not Hindu. Or he doesn't understand my faith. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
yeah,
So
yeah,
what
of
you end
course.
up doing is when what you see happening is you have to highlight a number of people across so many aspects of the game from so many different backgrounds, and they exist. So if you take the Sky Sports page we were talking about, when we talk about some of these success stories from last year, but when the Porowal twins, Arjun and Amar Porowal, were the first twins to face each other at Wembley in the FA Trophy final, while the Asian community was proud, there's a huge surge of pride from the Sikh community and the Indian community because they feel a deeper connection to the players. When Hamza Chaudhry put out when he collaborated with EA Sports and they put out the collaboration with Ramadan League in Birmingham, there's a huge surge of pride from the Muslim community who was passing that period because all of a sudden we found a deeper connection with that individual. So these individuals can create deeper connections with certain members of our communities. But what we're trying to do is show them as a whole collective. They're a collective as a whole. They all have their individuals and they can all appeal to each one of us in a separate way, but they show a togetherness. I think that's important. We're talking about role models. You can have role models at different aspects of the game, whether they're playing in the Premier League or they're playing in non-league football. Every aspect of that is important. And then once you start saying that role models can be at all levels of the football pyramid, we can then find our place in that pyramid and anyone can go, do you know what, I might follow that pathway or I might follow him because he's a Muslim and he's done it or he's Sikh and he's done it. Then you find that pride in there. And I don't think we should use that as a tool of separation. We should say we've all got our own individual belief systems and our own ways of living. Collectively, we're stronger and we appreciate and respect each aspect of each other's beliefs and systems. And I think that works. Now, when we're talking about what Cash the Flash mentioned, it's interesting because kickboxing as a whole was a big sport back in the 80s. And I hope it has a resurgence one day because it's a great sport. And a lot of kids end up doing kickboxing, didn't they? Also, they may not have reached heights within the world stage. I know we've had Sonny Hero and a couple of others, but it encouraged others to take up kickboxing as a form of whether it's defense or recreation or just get involved in sport. And Cash as well. I think he's thought about if you have one, then others will follow. But it depends on whether they follow in the pathway of getting to a professional standard or whether they just participate and
Yeah.
continue in that sport as a recreation. So I think there is sometimes a clarity required when you say if it takes one to break through. What we want is all to break through at all levels and then us to find a place where we're going to be because we're not all going to be Premier League ballers, but some of us might find a way down the pyramid and still end up at Wembley like the Porowal twins or playing in semi-pro football, and that's still a wicked achievement in itself. And we talk about that with the respect that it deserves. I think we'll be in a better place in 5-10 years' time for sure.
No, absolutely.
I wonder
100%.
if I just throw something in there, it's probably a discussion for another time. I wonder if there's an age thing in that. Now, what I mean by that is, look, I'm old. I'm 49. So
plus.
when I plus when I was growing up, etc., there's very few either black or Asian role models. So even if I saw a black footballer, there'd be a part of me that would feel a bit of pride because I was thinking, yeah, that's someone who's, look, I guess for want of a better phrase, non-white representing, and that was someone I could relate to, etc. Now, slowly over the years, there are more blacks, there are more Asian people in the media, etc. So perhaps now it's possible to be a little bit pickier. Going to what you're saying, Z, about sometimes. I mean, fully get it that. Look, if someone's Muslim and someone's talking about the Ramadan League, yes, you'd have that affinity. But at the same time, Hamza Chowdhury winning the FA Cup, I loved that. I know you did. You literally got the T-shirt.
I did.
Look, I think the one key point of that you're talking about, basically, because I'm roughly the same age group as you, Apu, in terms of, you know, growing up and stuff. Very few like kind of role models, obviously, from footballer side of things. We did see black players, but you know, I come from a generation like watching footballs in the 80s and the early 90s, where you saw John Barnes having to kick off a banana peel on the pitch and playing for England and still being booed by his own fans. And so, you know, our parents came from that generation, you know, encountering the National Front, you know, dealing with the Southall riots, dealing with the Brixton riots, and going to football stadiums. I know, speaking to my father-in-law when he used to go to watch Derby and things like that, there used to be a horrendous level of racist abuse, you know, within the game itself, you know. And so it was, I think that echoes the reasons why that we get dissuaded away from, you know, our parents' generation wanting us to get into football. And I think now the next generation of parents who can see, you know, footballers out there right now currently playing football, there's a lot more encouragement, you know, that comes with it, and obviously the successes that come with that as well, you know. So why don't we discuss some of last season's successes in itself?
Z, go on, start. I know you want to.
I'm going to give this to you because we did an hour-and-a-half podcast on this. So I can't remember what episode it is, but it's a 90-minute special, and we had Anwar on join us as well for that. Apu, I'm going to let you kick off, and then I'll interject where I need to.
Such courteous guys. Yeah. Wow.
So, all right. So, you know what? The last year has been fantastic. The last season, we did do a special with Anwar. I believe it was episode 30. I'm going to say 37. I could be wrong. But check it out. Our Game 2 podcast. Have a look at that. And in the last year, we were talking quickly. We had to get in everything that's happened in the last year. So there's some really fantastic things that happened in season. I'm going to kick off with Arjun Reiki at Villa. He was a youth team player. Villa got hit by COVID, and then all of a sudden the Villa youth team got thrust into the limelight, and you had Arjun Reiki playing centre midfield against Liverpool. And yeah, listen, he had a fantastic game. They did well, but even better than that, Villa, that youth team, perhaps spurred on by that, they went on and won the FA Youth Cup, and Arjun Reiki was the captain of that team, and he set one of the goals. So that's what I'll kick off with. Z?
I'm going to big up one of my guys. I've been following his career since he started, Melvin Benning. He's currently at Port Vale, but last year he brought up his 200th league appearance for Mansfield Town, and at that time, that was his 6th season at Mansfield, and he was their longest-serving player. So to have one of our own to be playing so many matches in that particular, you know, in 6 seasons, being a constant in a team, that's what we want to see. We want to see that visibility on the pitch, and that was one of them. And the thing about Mal is he's such a nice guy. Even the fans love him, and they love him for so many reasons, but his nickname at Mansfield was Sir Mal. Now, if you've got that kind of affiliation with the fans, and that's what we're talking about, the fans loving, it just makes us even more proud that it's the football fans who are loving one of our guys for their team, and that guy is performing for them. So for me, that was one of the big kind of highlights of last season.
Can I add one? The other day, we were having a conversation before the show, and I'm an ignorant South Asian football fan. So I'm learning about all these players that you guys are talking about, which is amazing to me. And one thing that we've spoken about quite a lot right now is men's football. But when we do talk about equality within the game, you guys mentioned to me that there's an Asian footballer who not only won the Golden Boot, but I think she even got to the Champions League final as well, and representing our community as well at the same time. Is this true? And can you please share her story with us?
Yeah, so that's Sam Kerr. She's an Australian international. And yeah, she plays for Chelsea. She won the Golden Boot in the Women's Super League. She won the Women's Super League with Chelsea, and she got to the equivalent of the Champions League final with Chelsea as well.
Amazing.
So on that, I'm going to go with another woman next as well. Aston Villa, who played in the Women's Super League last year as well. You had Asmita, I'm not sure how you pronounce her surname actually. Is it Ali, who's Nepalese origin, daughter of a Gurkha. She's just made a move to Spurs in the last couple of days, but she was Aston Villa's player of the season. So Aston Villa have lost this week both their men's and women's player of the season.
Oh, dearie me.
They'll be all right. We got Z.
I'm going to mention Jan Danda. Now, earlier in the season last year, unfortunately, he was a victim, like many other footballers, of racist abuse online on social media. And for how else can you put it other than, it's deeply saddening to hear that's happening, and it's still happening right now. What was kind of heartening was the way his team supported him. Now, I've heard of players being abused or racially abused previously, years ago, and they had to grin and bear it. Now what we're seeing is some form of action being taken. Now, is it the right form of action? Subjective. It's subjective. Is a media blackout, social media, the right form of action? Again, subjective. But some kind of action some kind of perceived action is a base layer that this is what we're doing right now, and we need to do more and more and more. If we don't know what's happened before, we don't really have an understanding of what sort of action needs to be taken. So the good thing with Jan was he's supported by his teammates, he's supported by the manager, he's supported by Swansea City, and they were one game away from getting to the Premier League. They got to Wembley in the Championship playoff finals against Brentford. We all know what happened there.
Come on, you please.
But that would have been just rewarding to see young Jan in the Premier League. But it just showed that with this right support, no matter if you do suffer these kind of injustices in the game, if you've got that support of your teammates, your team, you can go and play a positive contribution for them because you've got their backing. And I guess in anything, we're talking about a collective unity. That unity was shown by Swansea City, almost got rewarded by promotion. So I guess if we're going to say turn the negative or positive, the positive, it was almost an absolute positive if they won, but they got to the final, and it shows that they've got that ambition to go one step further, and hopefully they'll achieve that this season.
Cool. Next, we mentioned, look, there's more to life than the Premier League. We know that. We mentioned the Puriwal Twins playing in the FA Vase final last season. I'm going to go with a slightly different competition next. The Welsh Premier League was won by the Connacht Nomads, and they have an Asian player who's been playing for them for a couple of seasons now. They've won it both years, which is Samran Dul. So just as a reminder, I think, to our listeners, football is massive in this country. When I say massive, like I said, it goes Premier League, then you've got the official 4 professional divisions. It also goes down to, there's a couple of divisions of what is traditionally non-league, which is now pretty much semi-pro as well. And there's some Asians playing in Scotland. There's an Indian national playing for the Rangers women's football team. There's other teams as well, and like I said, for the Wales League, Samran Dul, he won it again. That's 2 years running. Good on him.
Fantastic. I'm glad you mentioned Indian national. My very first memories of seeing any Indian or Asian footballer playing in English football was the great Baichung Bhutia, who played for Bury back in the late 90s. And I was a big subscriber of World Soccer Magazine, so I'd known about the Indian national team. And to find out that one of theirs, in fact, the legend of their game was signing for Bury, and I think the old Division 2, I believe at that time, was a massive thing for the Indian football fan. And I guess that was the first real instance for me of seeing anyone with my skin color playing, in any level of football. And I guess, since then, we've seen a massive crop of talent that's come through within the game, and some of the great players that you guys have just mentioned. But let's see if we can try to combine all of these things, all of these guys. Can you guys, between these creative genius minds of Asian football, would you be able to put together an Asian first team 11 based around all of these great players? A toughie, but I think you guys can do it.
Probably get a squad together. All right, let's go. I'm going to kick it off with a goalkeeper, seeing as I have a bit of an affinity with that position. Rohan Luthra was a professional at Palace. He's just signed for Cardiff City, and he will be the under-23's #1 goalkeeper. He's a big lump. He's 6'5". Again, talking about small Asians, he's obviously going to disappear there. He's going to. So this is his second professional contract, which is a big deal. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he gets on, and hopefully he may even get involved in perhaps a couple of first team squads as well.
Awesome. All right. So should we? Okay. So you're going for the goalkeeper. Have we got anyone at right back that we can champion?
Oh, right back. Now, what was the famous phrase that Carragher said to Gary Neville?
I don't think we can say it because it's a family show right now, so we can't really.
He said that no one wants to play. No one wants to play football to play right back, right?
Yes.
So, but we have a talented player currently playing right back for a team called AEK Larnaca in the Cypriot First Division. We're going to Europe here now.
No way.
Yeah, so Sim started his career at Leicester City. He was in the academy coming through. I think he was a couple of years younger than Hamza Chowdhury at the time. And Leicester have always had players within the academy from a South Asian background. Sim then, after he'd done his scholarship, he moved to Stoke City before embarking to go abroad to Cyprus and play for AEK Larnaca. So he's going to be playing there. Now, Larnaca normally get mid-table, pushing for those Europa League qualifying spots.
Yep.
So they're looking in a good, strong position right now. He's only 21. He's racked up about 30, 40 games in his time that he's been there, probably more, correct me if I'm wrong. But looking forward to seeing him playing a more of a pivotal role, a more starting role, as I think it's his third season now in Cyprus. So now the time to see how he gets and develops and whether he's going to be that guy who's going to push Larnaca to that next level, hopefully looking at Champions League spots, league title. It's always interesting to see when you're looking at a team that's always pushing upwards, see if one of our boys can help them get to that position as well.
Fantastic. Right, left back, Apu, what were we saying?
I've mentioned this meter before. I think, like I said, she proved herself last season. She was the Villa's player of the season. I know we're mixing it up in terms of genders. We're going to throw a couple in there. Why not? Like I said, she's just moved to Spurs. So, and WSL has got a little bit more funding and stuff. So I think it's going to be a big year it's a big year for the WSL. It'll be a big year for Tottenham. And I think they've got high hopes for Asmita. So best of luck to her there.
Excellent. Right, so both the centre-back pairing, two big rocks at the back. We keep talking about this within Asian footballers and the fact that we've got so many great defenders that we've had over the course of time. Who are the two centre-backs for this team, Z?
Do you know what? There's quite a few choices out there, but I'm going to go with a pairing at different levels of where they are within their careers. We've got a career veteran in Danny Bart. Danny Bart, anyone from Midlands will know who he is. Any Wolves fans out there will know this guy. He even had his own chant at Wolves as well. Is that much affinity with the players that came through the academy. He was club captain there as well, helped them to promotion from League One and the Championship. Didn't get to play in the Premier League. He's currently at Stoke City. Stoke City, everyone knows that they used to be in the Premier League, fallen on a hard time slightly. at one stage they had Mark Hughes and all these great players there, and then they've kind of lost their way. But Danny's played a big part in the last 2 seasons trying to find a stability with Stoke. They're a team that's threatened relegation 2 seasons ago, and he scored 5 goals in the last 6 games, I think it was, to help them stave off relegation. And last season, it was like the unlikely playoff push, really. But he's a player that's constantly reliable in the centre as a centre half. He's got the experience, and I think if he was part of our first 11, he'll be probably our skipper because he's got that experience. He knows the game. He's played at different levels of football in England as well, outside the Premier League. So he's the one. We'll see how he gets on, whether he can push that team to some kind of success this season. And I'm pairing him with Issa Suleiman. So many may or may not know that Issa Suleiman captained England to the European Championships at under 19 level. So it's in terms of representing the national team, not quite the full team, but under 19 level is still a big achievement. And to be captain as well, scored in the final. So you search on YouTube, you'll see the winning goal. I think he plays with a certain Mason Mount in that team as well. He's currently in Portugal, so he moved from Aston Villa to Portugal last year, and now he's in his second full season, and he's been sent out on loan because there's a lot of happening where he's at in the team he's moved to. He's moved to Vitoria in the Primeira Liga, playing the first division in Portugal. He's moved to CD Nacional. Now, the interesting fact about CD Nacional is they're based in Madeira, where certain Cristiano Ronaldo from. So, if anyone fancies a trip out to Madeira, go to the Cristiano Ronaldo Museum, go catch a game and see our boy play as well.
Amazing. Okay, right. So we've got our defense now. Let's get into the midfield. Apu, who are our? Let's do like almost like a 4-4-2 system. I think. Who are the 2 like midfield linchpins in our current 11?
So the first one I'm going to go for is Zidane Iqbal. He's at Manchester United. He's just signed a pro contract. So Manchester United had a successful season last year. Everyone knows that. They've got European competitions coming up, and they do blood their youngsters. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has continued to do that as well. So it might be a bit early, but the fact he's signed a contract is a massive plus for him. And yeah, I'm excited to see what comes of him. Whether he'll make his debut this year, I don't know. But the fact he's signed a professional contract is at Manchester United, big deal.
All right, and who is he lining up alongside?
Next to him? Z?
Yeah.
We kind of had a chat about this offline, and you kind of have a discrepancy about who I wanted. So let's hear your reason. Let's see if I can.
Extension in the ranks.
So you want Hamza Chowdhury?
Gotta be.
Has to be, no?
It probably does. The only thing I'd say is everyone knows Hamza Chowdhury. Like, if you talk at the moment, if you talk to anyone about Asians in football, they think of Hamza Chowdhury, FA Cup winner this year. He'll be playing in Europe, etc. this season. But in terms of broadening the conversation, giving other people to look at, etc., do you not think it's worth considering other players, or you sticking with Hamza and hoping he makes it as a breakthrough and breaks into the national team this year as well?
I see your point of view. I do, and I won't disagree with what you just said. However, I think success breeds success as well. And if you've seen someone lift the biggest trophy domestically outside of the Premier League in his country, the FA Cup, how can you leave him out? He's a cup winner. If you are going to have an 11, you've got someone who's got the experience of winning. And that's what we want to do. We want to breed that success of elite and winning mentality. And I think with Hamza, you have that. And to be honest, yeah, I think he's barely started his career. And if you think back, halfway through the season, there was talk of him leaving Leicester City. He wasn't even getting a sniff in the first team squad, let alone the first 15, right? So all of a sudden, that shows a bit of mental resolve. There's all this talk about him going out on loan, being sold to Newcastle or another club. Fact is, he stayed, he fought his place, and right still was given a chance to play in the FA Cup. For me, that's an example of someone who's got that resilience. He's got the success at the end of it, but the resilience is more important. What happens when you got knocked back? What happens when people are talking about you, that you might be surplus to requirements? Where's your mindset at? I think for that reason, if this was an 11, my guy's got the mindset because he's just proven it. So I could not leave him out. I would definitely have him in there.
I would agree with that, only because like we are trying to breed winners, and we are trying to breed people to come through with role models that people can see week in, week out. Not all unfortunately your average South Asian football fan is going to be able to watch football across the pyramid from Scotland, Wales, and England. And when you see Hamza Chowdhury playing week in, week out, he's probably going to come on in a bit in the Charity Shield potentially, and we'll see him in the Champions League hopefully in the next few years if Leicester qualify for it. And so that it's very, very difficult to leave someone of that caliber out of your squad. We want winners, and we want people to be there to inspire that next generation, and who bigger than Hamza Chowdhury currently. So I'm gonna go with Z on this one. Unfortunately, up was 2-1 on this, but I'll give you the chance to talk about potentially two great wingers that can form into our system instead.
Just before we go to that, just the great thing about this conversation right now, normally when you talk about Asian footballers, you struggle to name another one. The fact
Absolutely.
that we can argue about one position and more than one play in there,
Yes,
for me, it's a good sign.
Yes.
If we can then help someone who's watching this right now add that to their next conversation, even better. If you had more name, 2 more names, 10 more names, it's better for us all. So I actually prefer we've had this kind of debate on this one position, because this helps us formulate that there's more than one player out there that we need to be keeping an eye on and watching.
Yeah, I mean, we could have. The alternatives for that could have been Arjun Reiki, who won the FA Youth Cup and has signed a pro contract at Villa since. We had Dylan Markanday at Tottenham, who was in one of their European squads last year as well. So he's in and around the fringes of the first team. So yeah, there are options. But all right, let's go with Jan Danda. He's had a little bit of disappointment towards the end of last season. Former Liverpool Academy player. He's now at Swansea. He's settled in there. He had a great season last year, and I think Swansea will have the bit between their teeth, and he's going to be an integral part of that.
Say no more. Shout to R77 official who knows the score.
That's Rudy, who will probably cuss me afterwards. Hi, Rudy.
So we've got Jan Danda. Hello.
Z, you want to?
Oh yeah, so
other midfielder.
Yeah, sorry.
You're busy thinking of Hamza Chowdhury.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that comment. We're going to put Simran Jama out there. Now, Simran Jama is a player who plays for Bristol City in the Women's Championship. She just moved there this season. Previously, she was at Lewes FC, also playing a Women's Championship. So that's the second tier of the women's game. So Simran, in her career, she was at Aston Villa for pretty much of her kind of formative years in football, from the age of 8-9 onwards. She's also got a link to Sporting Khalsa, who we kind of touched upon early in the conversation. So there's a great Midlands link from a community perspective, but also from a professional perspective as well. And she's also representing England at age group level. And now I'm playing her out on the wing. She's an attacking midfielder, right? So you want to see her up the pitch amongst the goals, setting up the goals, being a nuisance at the top end of the pitch. And hopefully this season she's going to get a run of games. Last season didn't see much of her, but she's only 20. And in terms of her career, it's the second season in that, or third season, should we say,
right,
as a senior player. So hopefully this season we're going to see that breakthrough. But we need to big up our female players as well, because ultimately when we talk about role models, it's not just about male, it's about female. And we're seeing a big push for women in sport across. If you look at the media right now, Sky Sports have their big push on women in sport. BBC have it as well. We should be doing the same. And I think that's why with this 11, we've gone with a mixture of players at all levels, but also male and female as well, to show that visibility that exists out there.
Right. Okay. We're very pressed for time. We've got two strikers. Literally just want names and clubs, and then we can check out this full 11.
Okay. Aksa Mushtaq is an English Asian lady who's playing abroad for FC Roma Women.
And she's playing alongside
Ariel Nabi. Once a starlet at West Bromwich Albion, currently playing for Greece team called Ofi Crete. YouTube him, last game of the season, last kick of the game, saved his team from relegation. That's what you call positive attitude, and the basically the positivity to go take a big moment and do well for your team. So that's our 11 we got there.
Amazing 11. Right. So for people who want to find out more about Asians in football, where can they follow the podcast from both of you and other links for us to check out?
Okay, I'll go first. I've got my podcast, Our Game 2, where we interview people, Asians that are involved in football in all kinds of aspects. Check out our back catalogue. I'm really proud of it. It includes all sorts of things. It includes people like Sanjay Bandari, who works for Kick It Out. It includes an Asian football hooligan, or former, I should say. It includes Anwar Uddin, for instance. So, yeah, check that out.
Z?
I also feature on the Our Game 2 podcast as well, if you want to hear more from me. I also run my own platform on Instagram and Twitter. So Twitter handle is Desi Ballers, which is DESIBALLERS. And my Instagram handle is in my name right there. So that's the handle that you need to be following.
Amazing. And you can follow the native immigrants across all your platforms to check out your podcasts, specifically on Spotify, Apple, Google, at the Native Immigrants Podcast on Instagram, and at Native Immigrants with a single M on Twitter. But for our footballers and all the footballers within the system from a South Asian descent, please go out and support your local teams, your local footballers across the scale. Without the support of our local community, we're never going to see our own players develop and progress. It needs the support from ourselves as a collective community for us to move forward as a collective within football as well. So go out and see Hamza Chowdhury when he's playing for Leicester City and all these other footballers across the UK. It needs our support and it needs our help. So thank you ever so much to everyone that's joined us here on this conversation on Asians in football. Let's go out and support the new players this season that's starting very, very soon. Much appreciated, everyone. Take care and peace.